Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
That's,
Now it is.
thank you. Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Great.
Well done.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. So basically, aside for this presentation, Nicole also sent us this Word document, which is another way of putting the information. In other words, I kind of rejuggled it and reorganized it. And this I thank a student of mine at Oranim who basically asked me to re-explain in another way. But I'm going to talk about this a little more as we go through it. So let's just go back to what I was sharing with you. Hang on a second. I'm back here. Okay. And you see the slideshow. Okay. And just to remind us all of concepts that we talk about all the time, but it's not a bad thing just to refresh in our minds. When we talk about a phoneme, we're talking about an individual sound unit. It's abstract and sometimes it's difficult to kind of imagine what that sound unit is, because when we speak words, we intertwine those words, and so we intertwine the phonemes. But the closest we can get to that is, for example, when we're saying fat is made up of f, at, okay, and then you blend it together and you say fat. And when you take out the f and put in a k, you're going to have cat. So that's a phoneme. You can say it's the smallest sound unit in a language. And a grapheme would be one or more letters representing a single speech sound. So for example, I've given here these examples of the I, the letter I, which can represent a phoneme I or E. But you've also got another grapheme here next to that, the IGH, okay, which people sometimes trigraph, in that there are 3 letters that make one phoneme, okay, and that makes the I phoneme. So both of those are graphemes, even though one is 1 letter and another is 3 letters, but they both represent one phoneme, okay? And then if we're talking about syllables, we're talking about a unit, either a spoken unit or a written unit, that must have a vowel sound, okay? And it could have consonants before or after that vowel sound. So for example, if we're talking and I'm using the word unit, I can break up unit into U-nit, okay? And U is 1 syllable and nit is another, because both of them have vowels in them. And when we're talking about written language, reading and spelling, there's a system of syllables that have been created to try and help individuals learn English, reading and spelling, and that's what we'll be talking about as we go along. And then to remind you, orthography really is correct or proper spelling. This is from Etymology Online. And that's what we're talking about. Talking about, is somebody talking? What do we do here? Mute. Okay. So we talk about orthography, but when we talk about orthography, we almost have to talk as well about phonology, because basically letters automatically make us think of the sounds. Letters help us get to correct pronunciation. And that's what this whole thing of teaching children reading and spelling in English is all about. So now what I'm showing you here is it's information that I gathered in some years ago, about 12 years ago. My colleague Stephanie Fuchs and friend helped me gather this information. And what we did is we asked children from 5th grade to 10th grade to tell us what sounds these various graphemes make. So we showed them the SH and they had to say sh, okay? So you could choose to ignore these histograms if you want. But if you want to pay attention to them, you can as well. Basically, it's just showing, starting from graphemes that were easier for students and we're going towards ones that were more difficult, okay? And you can see the SH didn't cause much trouble, the sh, okay? It was a small group, about 30 students in each grade, but nonetheless, it gave some kind of idea, okay? And the same with the ch, okay, the ch. We call this a consonant digraph. 2 letters that make one phoneme, okay? Di meaning 2. So it's true that the ch can sometimes also be a k, because that's Greek origin, and it can sometimes be a sh, which is French origin. And we know that a word like school is a very frequent word, and it's a word that children learn from 3rd grade, and it's already not ch, okay? So that would be something that we need to be comfortable with and on top of, because children might turn around to us, we're teaching the ch, and they'll say, well, why is it suddenly k? And basically this kind of knowledge, firstly, I would encourage children to be curious about the English language themselves, and to themselves look up and find out why certain letters make certain sounds in different situations. But I think the more we know ourselves about it, the better it is, and the more professional we are as well. Hang on, I'll just go back. Here we have a vowel digraph, in other words, 2 vowel letters that make one phoneme, and it's the E. Again, no problem here. Most children don't have difficulty with this. I saw children in 4th grade years ago when I was collecting data, managing with this as well, okay? And then you have the EA, another vowel digraph, okay? Which usually makes the E sound, but also rather frequently makes the E sound, okay? And that obviously causes trouble. Again, if they have to choose, I would say, let them choose the E, the long vowel sound. And after that, what they're going to have to do is learn their lexical knowledge. In other words, their knowledge of vocabulary is going to help them know that it's a pronunciation with a short E, like in the word bread. Okay? In addition, we know, of course, that sometimes this also makes the A sound, like in great or break. But you know what? I wouldn't go to that place unless we need to. In other words, at this point in the story, I would be teaching them things that they need at a particular point. So if we're talking about elementary school, I would say that we teach the most frequent of these, okay, towards maybe after 3rd, 4th grade, 5th and 6th grade. And certainly once we get to 7th and 8th grade, we're going to be in a place in 9th and 10th grade where we'll see that there are things that are missing, and we'll choose to teach it to them. And afterwards, a little bit later, I'm going to talk about situations where we just create these little mini lessons. I've done this with the cluster group in the meetings in the north, where we just created mini lessons where we taught a particular grapheme. Okay, so we can decide, we're seeing that a lot of children are pronouncing something incorrectly, and they're not able to identify words with a particular grapheme, and we can hone in on that. And we can create a resource for 15 minutes to talk about, to teach, to have them pronounce, to have them write, read, look up words, frequent words with that, make sentences with it, and then repeat it. In other words, going back and asking them again, what is it? Okay, having them say that it's E. Over here, we have all, and all is more than one phoneme, okay, because it's the O and the L. And it's considered, if you're talking about a unit, it's considered a rhyme, and it's spelled R-I-M-E. It's a linguistic unit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. I'll explain this to you a little later in the framework of the other table that I made. But it's just sometimes textbook writers in the past have referred to this as a word family. You know, they'll put together ball, small, tall, whole, full, etc. And it's another way of teaching reading. But there's some units that are stuck like this, and it's worthwhile teaching it as a unit. This is the R, okay? We call it a vowel R syllable. And it's a vowel R syllable because there's a whole lot of, not a whole lot, but there's a bunch of syllables that have got a vowel and an R, and it has a particular sound, and that sound needs to be taught. Now, how do I see this being a problem, and why would we teach this? Because in the past, when I've seen lists of words that teachers have created for teaching, say, the sound, you'll see like words like cat and man and sat, okay? And then suddenly you'll see car. And what's car doing there? It's a different phoneme, okay? So the R has an impact on the vowel that precedes it. And it needs to be taught as a phoneme, R. Interestingly enough, now I have a South African accent. And so I try and pronounce the R. I do pronounce the R as much as possible because I know that it's more user-friendly. But in principle, the way I was taught to talk was to say car. I don't say car, I say car. American accents pronounce the R. But I want the children to be able to pick it up as a unit, okay? So I would teach it as a unit, the R, and then I would have it in a whole lot of frequent words. And it's a frequent phoneme and grapheme. Okay, here we've got the ear, as in ear or hear, okay? But you also have like in earth or heard. And then obviously much less frequently, bear, air, okay? You have the CK, okay? CK that makes the K sound. And it appears at the end of a short one-syllable word or in the middle of a two-syllable word after a short vowel sound. And when we talk about the short vowels, we talk about the A, the E, the I, the A, and the A, okay? And I mean, I've heard a lot of children that have errors with that, that'll say black cook or blask, okay? But they won't know that it's black. And the same with spelling. I've had children that have been trying to spell words with CK, or where CK is included, and they don't remember it. But once you teach it as a convention, then it's something that's learned and it's a unit. They have to spend a whole lot less, you could say, cognitive energy paying attention to it because they've learned it as a unit. Here we have oi, oi, which is considered a diphthong that goes oi. It's kind of like a vowel shift, but we won't emphasize that now. It's also a rhyme in that you've got a bunch of words where it appears at the end of a syllable, like in boy, toy, and joy. And it usually appears at the end of a word or syllable. And then you have the o, the oo, like in moon and good, those slight differences in sounds, in phonemes there. But again, we don't have to maybe, in this kind of case, emphasize that. There obviously are exceptions, words like blood and flood, or door and floor, okay, but those I would treat as something separate. Most of the words with o don't fit into that category, and they oo or oo words, okay? WH, again, there's some countries, Ireland, where they actually pronounce that, so it would be what, okay, or when, but in most cases, this is just wa. We teach it as wa, they don't hear the H, and move on. By the way, if you just note here, you can see that in a lot of cases when we collected this data, 5th grade children struggled with a lot of these conventions. By 6th grade, they were in a much better situation. We didn't check any kids with learning difficulties at the time, okay? So it was 5th graders that had greater difficulty, after that much less, and that in itself is interesting, okay? This is considered a consonant LE syllable type, okay? I don't know how many of you have heard children who read this incorrectly saying tably, okay, or candly. And I always just want to say, why doesn't somebody tell them that? You know, in other words, teach it as a syllable type. Show them that if they see consonant LE, you're going to say bull or gull or zul or whatever else, full, and it'll never appear on its own. It's not going to appear as a syllable on its own. it is always a final syllable and there'll be something that comes before it. And then sometimes we have in this orthographic map of ours, we have morphemes, which also have meaning. So for example, ED, we know is a marker of the past simple. And it can be pronounced as de, and it can be pronounced as t, or as ed. And when it follows an unvoiced consonant, like for example, something where you don't feel, if I put my finger here on my neck, you can see, you can feel the vibration when you say a unvoiced or voiced consonant. Like for example, if I say wished, so the sh, you actually don't feel a vibration of your vocal cords. And so the following ED will be t, wished, jumped, okay? So many children say to me, jumped, when they read an ED word, okay? But if the word ends in T or D, then you say ed. So we started the car, okay? Again, you know, sometimes people say to me, this is overwhelming because I'm just throwing it all out. But I think that, again, and I always say this, I think we just need to feel that we make ourselves, we make a commitment to ourselves that we will learn this as much as possible as time goes on, okay? And my idea is, sorry. Sorry. Let me just go into this. Sorry. Okay. As I told you all, I'm still getting better at this myself. Okay. Okay. So it could be overwhelming in the sense that we're just kind of throwing it out. But firstly, I would teach this over a semester course or a year course if necessary, and do it slowly. I didn't learn this myself in one day, and certainly not in a week or 2 weeks. I learned it before I taught it. So I think as we go along, we just need to be working on this. Now again, the NG, very often people teach ING as a grammatical unit. But I would say that we need to maybe emphasize the NG because there's some children that want to put a vowel between it. They might want to go nug. And instead of doing that, you want to teach it as ng, this nasal phoneme, okay? Li or lie, which can also be, by the way, and this people seem to be more comfortable with, a morpheme in the sense that it often characterizes an adverb, okay? It can make the long E sound, as in slowly, and that's when it's a morpheme, adverb, or the long I, as in fly, okay? OI, the OI, remember earlier on we spoke about the OY, so here is the OI. The OY would appear at the end of a word, and the OI in the middle or the beginning of a word. Just take note here, the 5th graders again, struggling with this particular grapheme. And here is the TH, another consonant digraph, and we know for Hebrew language 1 speakers, this is a struggle. Okay, they very often will say da or z instead of the, and instead of saying th, the unvoiced, they'll go s, okay, or t, okay. And I'm going to show a little later an example of a mini lesson where I would teach the unvoiced, okay. Here we have IE, a digraph that makes the I sound, and when it comes at the end of a word, or the long E sound, like in a word like thief or believe. And OW, now originally the W was considered a vowel in the English orthography. So this is considered a vowel digraph as well. The difficult aspect of it is that it can make the O sound or the OW sound. And obviously once you've learned the one, then you have to pay attention to the other one lexically. In other words, they have to learn that words, particular words, make the OW sound and not the O sound. You can see here, by the way, on the graph, that a lot more children across the grades knew the O sound of OW, but not the OW, okay? EY, making the E, long E sound, as in key or jersey or money or monkey, and the A sound, as in they, okay? Now, actually, there are very few words with EY that make the A sound, but because they is such a frequent word, very often when you show it to them, they'll say A and not E, okay? I think that, again, these are all issues that we as professionals can choose when to come in and use this information, you know? And that's on, particularly with junior high school and high school students. It's a matter of sort of coming in and putting it in or giving answers or discussing this when it's appropriate, when you see that children are struggling to pronounce something or they don't know how to read it properly, okay? PH, this is another consonant digraph, and you have here, it makes the first sound, as we know, it's Greek origin, and again, 5th graders struggled with this. And here's another vowel R, syllable, the ER. We've got AR, ER, OR, UR, and IR. And again, if you see that children are struggling with this, you might want to teach it. It also is a common suffix that makes it a morpheme, okay? And EI, the E as in receive or as in ceiling, okay? And UE, another vowel digraph, as in continue. Obviously, like in this case, there's U and there's U, like U as in continue, but blue and true, which is more U. Now, you can decide to be a little more pedantic with these aspects or to just let it go. Nothing will happen if they say blue, okay, or continue. But on the other hand, one of the things that we know is that if you want to get closer to English language 1 pronunciation, these are the kinds of exact details you might want to work on. So again, we're the professionals, we're working with the children at all the different ages, and we can decide what our goals are going to be and to what extent we want to emphasize these different things or not. This is another U. In this case, it's the silent E. A lot of times people talk about this as being magic E. We also know that this syllable type doesn't always work like this because we know that sometimes in words like gone, G-O-N-E, or done, D-O-N-E, or give or live, it doesn't make the vowel sound long, okay? But nonetheless, it's an important and useful bit of information to have here. And it's a point of reference. Most of the words do count if you know something about the silent E. Linguistically, we call it the split digraph because it's 2 letters, but it's split by a consonant in the middle, okay? So you've got the T in the middle or the N in the middle. And we know from language 1 studies that children in first language also struggle to read this. It takes them time to learn to read this, but obviously nothing like children that are studying English as a foreign language. And often we hear those weaker students going kate or tane, okay, instead of tune and cute. Here we've got the KN with a silent K at the beginning of a word. There've been so many adults who are weaker students that have said to me they never knew that when you see a KN at the beginning of a word, you don't pronounce the K. So this is something useful and important that's worthwhile telling them at some point. I'm not saying in 3rd grade, maybe not in 5th grade, but certainly at some point they need to learn this. And we have the AIR, which makes the air. Again, this is what's called a rhyme, R-I-M-E, as opposed to R-H-Y-M-E. And I would teach it as a unit, air. Okay, you can see, by the way, now I'm busy moving ahead at a relatively rapid pace here because I want to have time to show you the other things as well. And you can see that these are all getting more difficult. In other words, as we ordered this, I ordered the slides in the order of difficulty that children found this. So when I was examining this together with my colleagues all those years ago, OE was considered more difficult. You can see, and it's just going to get worse from here. So, and again, somebody might say, yeah, but when they see it in a word, they are able to identify it. And that's very much how English is often taught. It's taught in a whole language kind of way. So you just recognize the word as a lexical whole, but you don't always know how to generalize them to new words. So the idea here is that, sure, they will learn some words just as whole words, but that there's a whole lot of information that if they know how to pronounce those graphemes, if they know automatically the phonemes that are mostly characterized by those particular graphemes, then they'll be able to decode, in other words, technically read and spell the words a whole lot easier, okay? And here we've got the magic E or silent E or split digraph once again. The O, as in joke, road, explode, and see how many kids had difficulty with this. And then the A, okay, as in cake or name, relate, again, another split digraph or silent E syllable. And here we have the IGH, okay, as in the words night or high. I'm sure a lot of you agree with me that you've heard children reading it as nigget, okay, or hig. So basically it's just showing them, again, giving them a mini lesson with this particular grapheme, telling them it's the I, brainstorming together with them words where this particular grapheme appears in, having them read words, having them spell words, and having them choose to learn frequent words, either A1, A2, B1 level words, and at a later stage, maybe even B2 level words with these particular graphemes. So we're in a situation today, really, where we can walk this thin line between answering the needs for orthography and reading and spelling and answering the needs of vocabulary learning. You know, there's a terrific and a well-known researcher, she mainly researches in the field of first language, Linnea Airy, who has shown in so many studies how important it is that children see a spelling of a word. In other words, they see the word orthographically when they're learning the vocabulary item. They learn the word a whole lot better when they see it written and they hear it and they pronounce it. In other words, they're getting all this feedback about that particular vocabulary item from different sources. Now, this is mainly in language one. There's been a couple of studies done in second language, and at the moment, I have a master's student who's looking at this with 9th graders, okay? And the idea being is that we want them to learn the pronunciation of the word. And when they learn the pronunciation, we want it to be connected to the way the word looks. So in past situations, I've had setups where I've had people, adults, saying to me, is that the way you write the word? Or is that the way you pronounce the word? In other words, they haven't managed to make the connection between the way a word looks and the way you pronounce the word. And we want that all to be sitting nicely in memory. We want them to be able to make those connections. And the more connections they make, the better they'll know those vocabulary items. And this all, of course, as we know, is the building blocks of vocabulary learning, of reading, and of writing. Here we have the I, which is also silent E syllable, okay? And you can see that many students struggled when they saw this on its own. And then you've got the AY, okay, which is also considered a rhyme, but it's also considered a digraph and a grapheme. It's 2 letters that make one phoneme, A. And here, again, there are a few of these cases where we have a morpheme, which means something in the language, shin, okay? That means that it's a noun, a lot of times, I'm sure you're all going to agree with me as well, that you've heard children saying nation and station, okay, if they can say what the stat is, instead of reading it as station and nation. So we want to give them this T-I-O-N, tell them that it makes, that you pronounce it as shin, okay, and have them learn it as such. And then after that, whenever they see it, it should demand less cognitive energy from them, because they're not trying to decode every little aspect of it, but they see it and they know it as a unit, and they know that it represents a noun. And here we have the E with a silent E. Okay, we've had the A, I, O, U, and now the E, like in the word these or compete. Okay, and here we have the OA. So interesting, because, you know, when I first started studying this, I thought something like OA was so simple. And it was clear to me that kids would know this and everybody would find it very easy, a vowel digraph like OA. And yet so many children weren't able to identify it when they saw it. Now, it's not that there are millions of words with OA, but if they've learned it and they know that the first letter is the letter that makes the sound, they'll manage with it afterwards. You know, they'll see it and it'll be a unit. I say to them, I want their eyes to basically get used to it. Orthographically, it'll be a unit that they'll automatically know is O. Okay, and then afterwards, it's much easier, obviously, to put that into a word. And EIGH, which was considered a quadrigraph, okay, 4 letters that make one phoneme, the A sound, like in 8 or in neighbor, okay, and the DGE, which makes the J sound, like in judge or bridge or budget. And this is the same as the CK, by the way, and the same as the floss rule, which I actually didn't talk about today, but I've spoken to some of you about in the past, where it appears after a short vowel, okay, and you hear the J sound, and you write it as DGE, okay? Again, not hundreds of words with it. You know, when my colleagues and myself, particularly Fern Levitt, and I were mapping orthographically all these different graphemes for the 2020 curriculum, we hardly find any of these DGE words in fact, I'm not even sure there's one in the first band 1 words. But afterwards, they do start appearing. And if it's something that we want our students to know, then I'd say, give it 15 minutes, you know, teach it explicitly. And then go back and make sure that they remember it. And then give it to them in words that are going to be useful for them. And then they've got a gift. TCH, it's another example of the DGE, CK type words, okay? It appears after a short vowel, at the end of a 1-syllable word, or in the middle of a 2-syllable word. And you could say to me, I mean, that's so much to remember. But again, if you break it up and give it to them, one at a time, you know, maybe do 20 of these over the year as it becomes relevant. And not only that, I'd give the rule to them where necessary. If we're talking about weaker students, I'd give it to them in their first language. There's no reason they need to have this rule in English. We can give it to them in their first language, but they know when it appears, okay? And I've worked with kids in the past with learning difficulties where I would give it to them, in my case, in Hebrew, and but they would identify it as ch, and they would be able to see it for reading, spelling, and vocabulary learning whenever they see it. It wouldn't become catch, but rather catch, okay? And here we have another vowel digraph, the EW. Remember, I mentioned to you that EW is, W was originally considered a vowel in the development of the English orthography, and a lot of children don't know this. And just so interesting that you look at it over here, you can see there were 50% of 9th graders that identified this and 50% that didn't, out of the group of 30 that I tested. For 10th grade, 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, and 5th grade, a whole lot more just didn't identify it. And it was one of this was one of the digraphs that I taught in a study that I'm publishing now in cognitive development. And what we saw was, I taught it to strong students and I taught it to weak students. 2 classes of 9th grade children, and I matched them up to controlled classes. In other words, I had 2 classes of weak students, 2 classes of strong students, and the one group got my instruction after we'd done the post tests, and the other I was teaching teaching them and dictating. I taught them like 8 different grapheme phoneme correspondences, 15 minutes each, and the EW was one of them. And you know how beautifully, because I basically collected quantitative data, but I also asked them to what extent it helped them at the end. And the strong children spoke about the fact that they never learned these things before, and that it was so useful for them for improving their spelling automaticity, their reading and pronunciation, and their vocabulary learning. And the weaker student also mentioned that they'd never learned these before, but they said that it was a lifesaver for them. They asked me in the end to give them a list of all the orthographic conventions so that they could learn them themselves. And I felt so sad about that, because it's clear that it's very difficult to learn these kinds of things by themselves. But this is even more the reason why I believe that we need to systematically teach these graphemes throughout children's English teaching and learning experience. Okay, it needs to be something that's integrated into our textbooks and something that's integrated into our teaching and learning. And so here we've got the WR that makes the R. Okay, again, similar to the KN. I don't want to hear them saying were. I want them to remember that it's a silent W. And the AI, another vowel digraph. Okay, in other words, 2 letters making 1 phoneme. And again, I was pretty amazed when I saw how many children weren't able to identify this when they just saw the AI. Here we've got another quadrigraph, 4 letters making 1 phoneme, the O-U-G-H, like in thought and thought. And again, another silent E with the Y this time, which is very much rarer, okay? Again, I would just use it and teach it if you see that it's appearing in words that, that they're reading and they need to know it. And here you've got another morpheme, the zhin, as opposed to T-I-O-N, shin, that we spoke about a little earlier, also denotes a noun. And I don't want to hear them saying sion. I want to hear them saying zhin. Okay, and another vowel R syllable, the as in girl, 13, shirt. And we're now almost at the end, and you can see how many children aren't able to identify this. Okay, I think a lot of them said ear, so they'll say shirt, okay, or 13, okay, or girl. I don't know how they say girl. Okay, now we can say we're going to just leave that. All right, we don't need to work on it because it approximates correct English. But this is our decision, and it needs to be our decision. In other words, we need to be professional enough to be able to say when we're going to work on this and when we're just going to let it go. In other words, we can decide to what extent we want to work on pronunciation, on correct pronunciation, on getting them to approximate correct speaking of English. And certainly they need to be able to recognize it for vocabulary purposes, for reading purposes, and for spelling purposes. And here is another, what's considered very difficult for a lot of our students, as you can see, the OU, another vowel digraph that makes the owl sound, okay? And that in principle is considered also a novel phoneme in the sense that it doesn't exist in Hebrew, and I don't think it exists in Arabic either. So it's something that's new, that has to be taught, and there are no clues here because the O doesn't give us a clue. And AW, also very difficult, the OR, Okay, same as we learned, well, you'll see in another few minutes, we're going to talk about the AU. The AW is something that needs to be taught. Now, by the way, again, we can't give this to them all at one time, and we're not going to. And even when we spoke about third grade and fourth grade in the curriculum 2020, preparation regarding orthography and curriculum 2020, we said third grade and fourth grade. Oh dear, hang on, sorry. Third grade and fourth grade are, we're much more focused on short vowel sounds, long vowel sounds, the letters of the ABC, but afterwards we gradually are moving into teaching all these different graphemes, okay? And AUGH, or the same as OUGH that makes the or. Again, not 100 with this, but in frequent words that require us to teach it at some point. And AU also makes the or sound, okay, at the beginning or middle of a syllable. And then another vowel R, which makes the sound like IR. And you can see very, very few students knew this, okay? So it's something that needs to be taught. Now, I've ended up here just with a little exercise, and we won't do it now, but I'm leaving it here anyway for us to talk about for a minute or two, and then I'm going to move on to the other dimensions and talk to you a little about them. So you can see I've given words. I've taken all these words, by the way, from band 1. They include the different graphemes that I've just discussed. Okay, and I'm not saying that this is something we need to give our students to do, our children, pupils in class, but I think it's a good exercise for us, and maybe there is room to talk about using it at some point or another, but I think that we ourselves need to feel comfortable with this. So you've got a word like, for example, the word much, and if I had to say to you how many phonemes in the word much, we need to break that up into their individual sounds. So you've got much begins with m, then you hear the a, and then you've got the ch. It's 3 phonemes, okay? And we can use our fingers, or we can use some other kind of little discs or whatever to represent each phoneme, okay? So 3 phonemes, we've got 4 letters. That's a no-brainer for all of us. And then graphemes, remember a grapheme is 1 or more letters that represent a phoneme. So the M would be 1 grapheme, the U would be another grapheme, and CH would be another. So you have 3 graphemes, and a syllable is a unit, sorry. A syllable is a unit with a vowel sound in it. So much is 1 syllable. We could do the same with shop, but say we take a word complete. Firstly, if we break it up into phonemes, it's going to be k, a, m, p, l, e, t, complete. 7 phonemes, okay? How many letters? Again, no big deal, 7. Graphemes, it's the C will be a grapheme, the O will be a grapheme, the M will be a grapheme, the P, the L, and then you've got that split digraph of E and the E at the end, which is another, and the T. So that's also, what do we say, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay? And syllables, com and pleat, 2 syllables, okay? So these are the kinds of things we can work on with ourselves. I mean, if I go down to dark, okay, the dark would be D-R-K, 3, okay? And 4 letters and 3 graphemes and 1 syllable. So it's an exercise you can work on. We can, of course, talk more about that. I'm going out of this now. So I'm doing stop share. And I'm going to share something else with you now. Okay? What I've done, I'm going to tell you a little story now. I've been using that way of teaching. In other words, where I walk students through the English orthography, including the ABC. I've been doing this for years, okay? And I know that there are always students that struggle I'm talking about students that are studying to be English teachers. There's a certain percentage of students that struggle with the way I teach it. So very often, I mean, what I do is I give mini quizzes, and then I give them chances to make up, and I explain it to them. And we do it over and over again, because I really believe that this is one of the core building blocks of learning to read, write, and vocabulary, learn vocabulary in English as a foreign language. I had a student at the beginning of this year who has learning disabilities, and he came to talk to me in about November. And he said to me he cannot deal with the way I'm teaching the English orthography at the moment. And basically we had this hour-and-a-half discussion where he asked me all kinds of questions that brought me to reorganize the material in another way. In other words, he said to me, there must be some more logic in it. It's just too random, the way you're presenting it. Basically, the way I just presented it to you now is the way students coped with those different graphemes. In other words, I didn't bunch them together in any way. And what I did here, following my discussion with him, is that I organized all those graphemes and orthographic conventions into groups. And the groups are mainly according to syllable types, okay? So if you look here, this is this Word document that I asked Nicole to send you this morning. And I took all the examples from Band 1 words, okay? This is the work that I've done with Rita and with Fern. And you can see here that there are, firstly, we often talk about these different syllable types. I organized them according to a mnemonic called, hang on a second, I just want to write it up for you over here, Clover, okay? It's a mnemonic that you can use to help you at different points. This, I received this gift from Richard Sparks when he was here a few years ago, sorry, okay? And basically, what it is this is a mnemonic for the beginning of each one of these syllable types. So the C of clover represents closed syllables, okay? I think that any of you who've been in my talks before will remember that we spoke about, when we spoke about the initial bits of the ABC, and we said that one of the most frequent types of syllables are closed syllables. Closed syllables end in a consonant and have a short vowel sound. I didn't talk about that today because we were going beyond the initial letters, but you can see here, these are all closed syllables, like not and bed, sock and him, okay? But if you open the door, okay, like in, you get open syllables with long vowel sounds, hi and so and be and no. So basically the C of clover is the closed syllables, and you can see over here, I'll talk to you a little bit about the different colors in a minute. After that, you can see, I assume you can all see my cursor here, right? Okay, let me just do this. This makes it even easier to look at. And you've got consonant LE. So the L in clover is the consonant LE syllable type. And you can see words like simple, little, table, okay? And that's what I spoke about in the previous presentation. The O in clover is the open syllables, okay? And you've got a whole bunch of words with all the different vowels. So like the A in April, the B, the E in B, okay, or remember, the I or the phi in final, okay, the O like in ago or no, and the U like in computer or student or popular, the U in popular, okay. The V is the vowel team syllable type, okay, and then you've got the whole bunch here. So you've got things like EE like in week, and EA like in tea, and OY like in boy, and OI like in toilet, and OO like in classroom, and EY like in money, and IE like in peace. I'm not going to keep going down because there are loads and loads of vowel digraphs that we've already discussed. Okay, and then you've got here silent E that we've discussed as well, or could be called magic E or split digraphs. And you can see here, okay, vowels, consonants, and then a silent E. And this all goes along in clover. You've got, this is the vowel team, the V, this is the silent E, the E, and finally the R is the vowel R. So you've got OR, like those are the OR words, and AR that I spoke about earlier, the R words, ER, the words, and IR and UR, which are also all words. In addition to that, I also mentioned to you morphemes, okay, when we were going through it. So morphemes, again, to refresh your memory, units that have some kind of meaning. So it could be the ed, okay, like an excited or interested, okay, or the li, like an exactly or quickly, and the shin, action or information, and jin, like in television. And then there are others, okay? The others are usually rhymes. Not always, but usually rhymes. And this I actually didn't talk to you about because they're actually very much less frequent. But they exist as well. Things like the old, or the eind, or the ost, or the eild, or the all, which I did mention, okay? Or silent letters at the beginning. Now, basically what I've done here with all of this is I've organized them according to colors, depending on the different sounds. Like, for example, you can see the different shades of green with silent E for U and E, or O and E, or A and E, or I and E, or E and E, okay? The same with the closed syllables. I've organized them to be different shades of beige or brown, okay? Depending on what letter comes, what vowel letter is there. So you've got the can, and then the ten, and then big, for example, the I letters, words with I in them, or words with O in them, and so on, okay? Vowel teams, each time it's a different shade of green, depending on what particular vowel team we're talking about, okay? And so on. Now, if I go down this, hang on, I'm just gonna move you all across here so that I can do this. I'm just going down on this particular page, and you'll see that after you've got these particular groups, there are different definitions, okay? What's a phoneme, what's a grapheme, what's a consonant digraph, what's a trigraph, a quadrigraph, and a rhyme. So that's just for people's information with examples, and a morpheme, of course, and then also a definition of the different syllable types, the different colors, okay? So it kind of organizes it for you and gives you in 3 pages a summary of basically the entire orthographic map. Obviously, and you can see here that I've written, you may use the mnemonic clover to remind you of the 6 syllable types. And then in addition to that, there's a whole bunch of conventions here. So you've got, like, for example, these are things that I didn't discuss today again because they belong in the ABC. The K that becomes the S before E, I, and Y, or the G that becomes the J before E, I, and Y. But there also are a whole lot that I spoke about today as well. The CK, the DGE, the TCH, and so on, okay? So that's it's another way of getting to the same material that I spoke about. What I think that I'm going to do now, if you don't mind, is I'm going to take it, Nicole, is this okay if we take maybe a few questions, 3 or 4 or 5 questions, and then continue?
I had to unmute myself. Yes,
yeah.
Please. I'm sure there are questions.
Okay.
Who would like to jump in?
Okay. So I'm listening. No questions?
I've got one, Janina.
Yes, Yael.
Yes, you've mentioned that we should take that into our consideration when to decide to have like a mini lesson in a big lesson, and to decide when to stop for spelling reason or for grammar reason or for to reinforce the vocabulary thing, right?
Right.
Can you give me an example of how to do it when I deal with the vocabulary?
Sure. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, straight after this, after these 5 questions, I'm going to show an example of a mini lesson using
Okay.
the grapheme, the consonant digraph, th, okay, the th. And we'll talk about vocabulary within that, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Elaine wants to ask. Hang on a second, Elaine. Let me just, yeah. Elaine, can you unmute yourself? Because I seem to be struggling to do that. Oh, yeah. I don't know why. Okay, Elaine. No, can't hear. Can anyone hear Elaine? No. Oh, maybe just write, or maybe write your question on the chat.
So Janina, in the meantime, can I ask a question?
Yes, sure.
This orthographic map is amazing, and I have to say thank you to Manal. I don't know if she's here. Manal, I think you are here. But for explaining this to me when we spent time together last month. Before that, I wasn't quite sure how it would benefit me as a teacher and as a counselor, and Manal explained it to me, and I have been using it ever since. But I want to ask you, Janina, as BB counselors that go around, 1 second, children, just please be quiet a second. Thanks. They're playing Monopoly. They're doing something useful. Yeah, but as BB counselors, we're going into the schools and we're sitting with our teachers in these schools. How do you suggest we use this map to our benefit and to the teachers' benefit? How can it come in handy for us?
Firstly, I think it's useful because it's if we look at the map on the screen, we'll see. I'm just hang on a second. I also see Monica asked something about internalizing rules. 1 minute. I'm just writing that down. Okay. So sorry, I'm just going to share this for a minute. I want to go into the map because I sent this to you as well. Okay. You saw this. But you saw it blank. I'm just giving you an example here of somebody that Nicole sent this to everybody this morning. Okay, so in other words, it's concentrated all on one page here. And you could conceivably, you could be using it, the fact that it's all on one page and you can see what people have, or what other individuals or different children have, or what you've taught and what you haven't taught. Basically, or even going through it and seeing for yourself what you know about and what you don't. Like which of these you feel you need to learn more about. I mean, I use this primarily, this particular page, for assessment purposes. It's got a lot in common with the Able Kit, but the difference between this and the Able Kit is that it's more all-encompassing. It includes almost all the different graphemes. Okay, so basically I could use this as a point of reference for myself. Like if I want to make sure, if I'm a coordinator at a school, or if I'm a counselor, okay, and I'm getting to different schools, and I want to open up a discussion with the teachers in the schools about what they've dealt with and what they haven't. You know, we could have a discussion. We could look at this together and say, okay, regarding the letters of the ABC, what would you say the children know? You know, to what extent do you think they know the short and the long vowel sounds? To what extent do you think that they know the consonants? Okay. Obviously, we could also check that. And by the way, the easiest way of checking that in a group, because you can't sit with each child in a school and test them on all these different graphemes, would be to give them a spelling task to do. And then they would need to, you would see to what extent they're able, obviously spelling is more difficult than reading, but the two very much feed into one another. So you could see to what extent that they're familiar with these or not. And then going on, I mean, basically, you can see over here, and it starts off with what's considered more easier, and it moves to more difficult. So for example, over here, the SH and the OR and the CH are all considered a whole lot easier. But when you go down to AU and UR and ARE, those are considered more difficult. So it's kind of a checklist for you in a lot of ways, that you can decide how you might use this. This next section here with the consonant clusters, I'd say those are usually more useful for kids with learning difficulties, because they very often put a vowel in between. Like instead of saying blue, they'll go belu, you know. Most typically developing kids, I'd say, don't do that. Also, once we teach them that, they usually don't get that, they don't get it wrong afterwards. They generalize to others. But it's kind of a checklist for us. We can decide, I mean, you know, basically I developed a lot of this through my work with kids with learning difficulties. And I am very much open to I consider, and I've said this many times, us all as being colleagues in this whole story together. And I'd be very interested and curious to hear how people would suggest using this as a checklist for themselves and for teachers that in schools that they're working with, okay? Was there anybody else that wanted to ask? Have I answered you, Nicole?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. That was really useful. So more the checklist is more useful for me when I go into Hadracha schools. But I also find that the other slide that you had up of all the different things, all the different colored things, the clover, all of that is very, very useful for me to see which words from band 1 are actually useful for me to teach. When I'm teaching children how to read. I'm not just going to pull out any old words, but I'm going to focus on the vocabulary words that are recommended, at least at elementary level.
By the way, I must tell you that Fern and I think I've shared this with people, and I'm willing to share with pleasure. Basically, what we did is we took an entire band 1, and we mapped out all the words according to this. In other words, what I do all the time now, whenever I use any words for anything, I always refer to that mapping. And of course, it's a Google Doc that I'm happy to share with anybody. And we're talking now, Fern and myself, of continuing mapping band 2. Because it's clear to me that we have to try and merge, marry the two, orthography and vocabulary. In other words, if we're teaching orthography, we need to give examples of frequent words. And if we're teaching, and if we're working on vocabulary, we need to let them pay attention to orthographic aspects of it as well. Can I just show you now a mini lesson? So I'm just going to stop sharing this for a minute. And, oh, by the way, I saw that Manal wrote here that I shared that with them, and I'm happy to share with anyone else. And now they're waiting for band 2. Well, I'm going to get down and we're going to start working on it. I promise. So look here. Can you see the mini lesson here? Okay. So basically, it's not the most. I mean, it's aesthetic in the sense that it's neatly put out, but I wouldn't say it's. I mean, I've seen some of the work some of my students have done, which is just beautiful with colors and all kinds of stuff. So we can decide how we want to present this. But basically, when I was doing this intervention study with the 9th graders, I would go in, I'd put this up. This time we were talking about, okay, and then we would either brainstorm words with the TH, which makes the sound, okay. The strongest students obviously had a much easier time doing this. The weakest students struggled, and I helped them with it, okay. I also, by the way, when I taught this, I showed mirrors, and I think a lot of you, again, have seen, you've seen me teaching a 3rd grade class and showing a mirror. and pronouncing, showing your articulators, your tongue, your teeth, your mouth, okay, when you pronounce whatever it is. So here it would be, okay, and then we won't get a situation where they're going 13 and stuff like that, or 13, which is not the end of the world. I'm not saying it is, but again, it needs to be our decision, you know, to what extent we want to work on those kinds of things. So here I'm showing them the TH. I'm saying that we don't pronounce it. In this case, there's some times that we do. We say th, but in this case, we're teaching it as th, okay? And then what I do is, of course, I say for Hebrew speakers that this is a tricky digraph or grapheme for Hebrew speakers. And over here, you can see that I've got words with frequency letters. So with is from the A1, path is A2, and so on. I tried to choose words that were mainly more frequent, A1, A2, and there's one word that's a B1 word, thunder. So we would go through this, we'd read it together, and we would translate these. So Yael, when you asked earlier, how would I focus in on vocabulary? Basically, these are all words that they should be learning because these are important words. They're frequent words. They appear frequently in texts that they're going to be exposed to. But maybe I could give them choices as well, or I could choose what I would want to include or not include here, okay? I could say to them, we're reading examples with this, but I want you to learn the following words as vocabulary items, okay? And I'm going to show you a little more with that. So this is just, I could have them write the TH and pronounce, okay, in their notebooks. They could,
Janina, can you repeat the last sentence? You've been cut down.
oh dear, okay. I would have them write the TH in their notebooks and pronounce, okay, when they write it. I would have them think of a keyword. Each child can choose a keyword with H, okay, and at the back of the page, translate or draw a picture of the keyword. I'm going to show that in a minute. And then I would have them maybe write it a few times. Here I say write and pronounce it 5 times. I would also explain to them why we're doing this, okay? Because the more we deal with it, the more we talk about it, the more we feel our articulators saying, okay, the more we're going to remember it automatically. And I'm just going back to, I think somebody wrote, it's all very well teaching this. How can we be guaranteed they're going to remember it? So basically the whole idea is that we keep re-entering this information. So again, maybe I may decide like once a week, I'm going to teach a grapheme. So I'm teaching a 9th grade class or an 8th grade class. And I decide once a week, I'm going to give 15 minutes to a new grapheme like TH or whatever else that they haven't learned. Or I see a lot of kids in the class don't know. So I'm going to do it in this form of a mini lesson. And then for 2 seconds in the next lessons, I'll keep on revisiting. I'll write that TH on the board and I'll say, what sound does it make? Do you remember what your articulators do? Do it, okay? Do you remember, what was your keyword? What was your keyword, you know? And have them, and then ask them words that we wanted to all learn as frequent vocabulary items. Like I think of them our partners, which we do in a lot of situations. I think that they will be with us on board in terms of getting better at reading, pronunciation, spelling, and vocabulary. So here, look at this. This is like real stuff. I mean, I actually taught these 9th graders in this way. I said to them that this is the way I learn new vocabulary items. When I'm trying to learn Arabic, what I do is I'll write the word, I'll write some kind of phrase or sentence with that, and at the back of the card, I'll write the meaning, the translation. So in a way, the sentence provides me with a crutch. It's one stage before learning the meaning. Very often, some children don't need the crutch. They immediately remember it. But we know that a lot of the kids, and particularly the kids that are involved in the building blocks program, are the kids that take a whole lot longer to learn new vocabulary items, and they need a sentence to be something in between the actual word and learning the meaning. Okay, and so maybe here I would say to them, this is what I said in the 9th grade study that I did. I said, choose 5 words that you'd like to learn with a, but in the same vein, I could have said to them, I could have said, just make your own choice, you know. I mean, I could have decided for them that I want them to learn particular words. You can see, by the way, here that there are a whole lot of unlisted words. Depth and therapy and theft, they're all unlisted words. We need to decide to what extent we generally prefer to teach more frequent words now, because it'll go a lot longer. And then here it'll go further, sorry, with them. You can see here sentences with the, okay? So I can have them read them, all right? Depending on who the students are. Obviously, I'd want sentences that maybe are a little more meaningful to them. And then summarizing, review the TH that makes the th. Phoneme, what's your keyword, spell and pronounce it, write sentences with the words. We don't want to make this is not the main emphasis of our English curriculum, but this is a basic building block. This is something that is part of the foundations, you know, and obviously the more we know about it, the more we can intertwine it in our lessons. So yeah, that's the that's a one example of a mini lesson. What else? What other questions have you got? All fine. Okay, so you know, I mean, I think that maybe if people haven't got anything further to add, we can end. I'll save this. Obviously, maybe I can put it onto YouTube and then just share it as a resource. I think that it's again, it's a process. It's a process that I would argue that our textbook writers need to buy into in a big way. Some of these are obviously more frequent, others are less frequent. The main thing is that we feel familiar and comfortable with this, because when we feel familiar and we feel comfortable with these different orthographic conventions, we can make a whole bunch of decisions with this as to how to integrate it into our counseling, into our teaching, and into our students' learning. Other questions or comments? And if not, then we can say good evening and continue our evenings. Okay? So thank you very much, everybody. I'm available at any point if any of you want to talk to me or share ideas, and take care. Okay.
Janina, thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. I'll be emailing you a short assignment to do by Sunday, hopefully. Hope you find time in between all your online teaching and Pesach cleaning and other commitments. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much, Janina. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye, Janina. Thank you.
Bye.